points to go through. Some of it we've touched on earlier on in the first event that took place around kind of that impact of staff working from home and that impact from the pandemic. So we've already introduced ourselves. So I'm Becky, Colton. I'm from Hull City Council. As part of the project team, we've already mentioned that, but it is a collaboration project, and we've got East Riding, myself from Hull City Council, North East Lincolnshire, North Lincolnshire Council, Hull, the University of Hull, and also Microsoft as well. Unfortunately, colleagues couldn't join us today. So really, what have we been doing? So I'm just going to take you through a bit of a journey from kind of phase 1 and into phase 2 of the work of the Future Work Design project. And as we mentioned earlier on in the first discussions, the kind of pandemic really forced us all to work from home quite rapidly, which meant us all adapting to new ways of working very quickly. And for us, it was really important at that time to understand what some of the benefits and challenges of this was, so that not only can we support staff, but also we know there was some positives out of it and we really wanted to sustain it. So it was around us kind of looking at them working practices. It was us being able to recognise the experiences of staff, and also for us to kind of consider that productivity, motivation, well-being. And like I said, for us, it's around sustaining them good future working practices as well. But if we don't support some of the challenges, it's going to prevent us from sustaining them. If anyone's got any questions or anything, just put in the chat. So in terms of the phase 1, what we did, we looked at gathering data from staff around the experiences of the working practices. So we did a lot of workshops across all 4 local authorities, which were run by Hull University, and they gathered them experiences, like I said, the challenges and the benefits. What this was then used for is to provide a bespoke tool, and that was to kind of measure the kind of prevalence of these issues. And that tool is the remote working stress risk assessment tool, which I'll talk about in a bit. From that as well, then the Hull University produced a white paper, and that report had the findings in, but also some recommendations. What accompanied that also was some working practice profiles, and the working practice profiles related specifically to role types such as field workers or social workers. And also part of that was the survey tool, which I'll come on to a bit later. So some of the activities are part of that group. I mentioned that. So we had focus groups across all the 4 local authorities. We based these on functionalities, so that's how the working practice profiles were developed. So I won't go through them all because you can see a list of some of them there. So business to business, customer contact, that business supporting facilities. So we kind of grouped them together. And then also we did a focus group that was consist of all like the corporate strategy team members from all 4 local authorities. They all formed a focus group as well. Some of the themes around this, what we looked at as part of this report, was around the challenges, the benefits, around caring for others, management, communications, relationships, that digital transformation, and hopes for the future. In terms of some of the challenges that came up, and I'm sure a lot of you can all relate to this because we've all been through it, not just all local authorities, but every single organisation has been through this. So you'll be able to relate to some of these. And so again, I won't go through them all, but some of this was like that threats to well-being. So demands went higher. So a lot of people was doing the day job, but as well as working support the pandemic as well and that crisis work. So with that COVID response. A lot around peer relationships and social isolation. So whereas being at home, we've got teams and we can talk to each other. What we don't have is that office support, that just making a cup of tea in the kitchen and saying, hello, are you okay? So there was a felt of a loss of that as well. Home working environment, some members of staff felt that we was intruding within the home. So there was working within the kitchen or within the living room where other family members may have been working, especially at the time when we was homeschooling us at the same time. Another one then was kind of the identity side of it. So that unhealthy behaviours. So staff were reporting that they want switching off and they want moving away from the laptop as well, because they felt like they had to be available all the time with them working at home. And that's really not good for our health and well-being either. Some of the benefits though of this, which I think is really important to kind of say that there has been a lot of benefits to it, and that's some of the stuff that we really need to kind of work on some of the challenges so we could stay in. And one of them is really about choice. And a lot of staff were saying that they want to continue to have that autonomy, to have choice, to have that flexibility, and maintain blended working, so that it's not about where they work, it's where they need to be, depending on that activity of work. So that could be home, it could be the office, or it could be at a location out in the community because they need to be working with residents in the community. So that flexible, working flexibly as well. So that's around that work-life balance. So staff wanted to maintain that because they was able to take the kids to school and then come home and work, or they was able to have them caring responsibilities. So felt a lot of staff felt that it really did support that work-life balance. And the catalyst for change is around that transformation side of it. We went into huge transformation, not only the way we work, but technology. Microsoft 365 was rolled out really quickly, was having more team meetings online, one-to-ones, catch-ups. But a lot of staff felt like that it was quite exciting as well at some points because of the change and the change we went through. The most benefit, which came up at probably the highest, was the reduced commute, because the staff was not felt that there was less commute time. They didn't feel like there was rushing around. They didn't feel like there was getting stuck in traffic, which then links into that productivity side as well, because they felt they had more time kind of to do the work rather than being the travelling time. But also around kind of that productivity side of it as well, is like some members of staff said they had fewer distractions as well being at home rather than being in the office, because in the office it's quite easy to get caught up in conversations, especially when you need to be really focused on a piece of work like a report or a business case if you're writing it. And then another benefit that came up out of this was around cost savings as well. So travel expenses, car parking, and for myself, not spending money on clothes on my lunch hour. So yeah, so some of them cost savings as well came out of the benefits. Another side of it that came out around it was that caring for others. So flexibility, I mentioned last side, just made it life easier for people with caring responsibilities or young children. Although the kind of that work-life conflict on that one that came out was like some staff felt that like they was guilty for working in the home when they had family in the house as well. So although it was making life easier, on the other side of it, there was some conflict there as well, which links into that impact on others in the home environment and how they felt that them working in the living room or kitchen was impacting on others. One of them that came up as well was around issues of fairness and flexibility. Some staff members felt that those with childcare or care responsibilities had more flexibility than others. So that's something that we need looking at as a whole in terms of them processes and policies and procedures. I've mentioned caring for others. And another thing is that I think a lot of people realise that in the pandemic, everyone has different personal circumstances, and we really need to recognise that. And also as managers, we need to recognise that not everyone's situation is the same, and we do need to deal with that differently. Which brings me on to management, communication, relationships. And I've touched upon the first already. We are all individuals, and we need to think differently about some of them discussions that take place and how we conduct our one-to-ones. Trust and acceptance of remote working. A lot of staff felt like presenteeism was still going to be a problem, and that managers like to see staff where actually they felt that they've because of working at home, they've already should have built that trust and acceptance that when they are remote working, the work's getting done. Because even if you're in the office, it doesn't mean that you're carrying out the work. Modelling the healthy practice and work-life balance, that managers need to be modelling themselves, and we mentioned about leading by example. We need to lead by example at the top as well. Team comms and informal, so this mentioned around kind of the lack of debriefing because we was working remotely, so that was missed, and I mentioned about the kitchen kind of scenario. But on the other side of that, they felt like there was having more quicker catch-ups via Teams, like the manager was checking in for 10 minutes on daytime just to make sure that it was okay. It's also mentioned that it's important that we continue to have structured meetings as well, and that we have them regular team meetings so that we still can sustain in them working relationships within teams, but passing that knowledge and knowing what we're all up to in terms of work and where we are with projects. So that's still important. In terms of the senior management comms, they did feel like there was a bit of disconnect between what staff was saying and what was happening in terms of some of them senior management comms that was coming out. External relationships, so that was very positive. A lot of staff were saying that actually the relationships with partners has got a lot better because they connect quicker rather than partners having to travel to an area to meet. They could quickly, easily just jump on a Teams call. So then external relationships got stronger. The digital transformation stuff that came out of this was about that culture change. Around that kind of the pandemic has caused a massive culture shift, but we've also learned loads as well around new technologies and new tools that we can use. So that's been really positive. And that links again with the software and hardware. Kind of Microsoft 365 and Teams has just been a massive key enabler to us, and I think we recognise that throughout this session earlier on, that it's such an important tool to keep us all connected. One thing that did come up as a barrier there was connectivity issues, that staff have issues, that staff can have issues with connectivity, and that can be their own Wi-Fi as well, especially if they're in urban areas. And then security was around confidentiality, especially if you're working at home with others and you've got a highly confidential job. So that came up as a concern. So some of the hopes for future, so I've already mentioned this, staff want to sustain blended working and they want it to continue. Social interaction and collaborative spaces. So staff want us to continue having social interaction. We're social human beings, and it's in the office space is still really valued by people. That even if you go into the office and it's for a meeting, that it still does happen, and that staff do return to the workspace. And that's so important for our health and well-being as well, and our motivation, but also looking at how we configure our work area differently. So for in a whole, we're looking at different collaborative furniture to support us working more flexibly. So that might be putting more booths in instead of desks in, and that kind of really enables that communication. Culture of flex, I've mentioned this already, but they want a culture of flexibility, choice and trust. They want the autonomy to have a bit more choice about where they work. Obviously that is determined by business needs as well, but they want to continue with that flexibility and choice. And I mentioned earlier on about fairness. It's around having that fairness in the approach, but also we need our policies and our guidance to support a blended way of working. So we really need to kind of look at updating them. Some of the recommendations that came out of the report was around acknowledge choice and flexibility, that we need to use an evidence-based approach to decision making. So before we make snap decisions or decisions about how many times we need to be in the office a week post-pandemic, we really need to be evidence-based approach to this. We need to boost our management skills. We need to incorporate more face-to-face interaction and make sure that happens, and also look at how we facilitate informal communication with teams as well. One of the tools that came out of this was the survey tool. So I mentioned this earlier on. This is the stress risk assessment working tool. So this tool is aligned with the HSC's recommended risk assessment approach to work stress and constitutes a suitable risk assessment. So we've already run this survey in Hull City Council and East Riding of as well. And this is really an evidence-based risk assessment tool, and it's to provide us with more of that insight into kind of thoughts and experiences of staff, so that what we can do there is really look at the targeted areas of where we need to intervene and work closely with directors and service areas to kind of help in them areas. So we just kind of wanted to touch on this, kind of say about how kind of important it is. This all is because when you think about health and safety in the workplace, at one point it was really key that we looked at how we can intervene in the workplace in terms of health and safety. So we'd look at making sure ladders weren't stuck out. We would make sure that wires work across the floor so that staff weren't falling over and injuring themselves. And this is really what we need to do as part of this the health and wellbeing and supporting staff, is looking at where we do need to intervene in the workplace. So thinking about using the results from the stress risk assessment tool to think about what areas do we need to intervene. So I've kind of shared this slide to kind of say about we're doing a very similar approach to what we did when health and safety was really evident at that time, and that we really need to look at how we deal with the stress and not just treat the symptoms. So kind of a part of this is understanding them levels of intervention. So what we're doing is we're looking at kind of that primary, the secondary and tertiary side of it. And where the primary is that we're proactively working to stop the risk. The secondary is where we're helping people to cope better with the risk. And then your tertiary is where we're helping people who are already unwell. And what we need to do is, although that tertiary side, we were doing so much of it. I mean, we've got mental health first aiders, there's a lot of counselling out there. But what we need to do is look at the primary side of it and really look at how we can focus on risk and controlling it. So it's about that risk control. So if you think back to the health and safety side of it, is if it was an health and safety example, on the tertiary, we'd be giving on the tertiary, if say somebody sat on a nail on the chair, on the tertiary side, we'd give them a bandage. On the secondary side of it, we'd advise them to sit around the nail. But on the primary, we'd remove the nail in the first place. So really, it's kind of thinking along the same lines and thinking how valuable it is that we treat the symptoms rather than the cause. And this is what this work is all looking at. That stress risk assessment tool has 6 main domain areas. So you've got demand, control, support, relationships, role and change. And you can see some there, I won't go through them all, but you see some there like where there's some of the key areas. And on my previous slides, we talked about some of them challenges working from home. And in the demands one, you can see some of that is workloads and deadlines, the impact of change, management support, and that autonomy. So there's areas there where the stress risk assessment is focused on, so that then we can really dig deeper into what support's needed within them areas. And some of these that came out was around that back-to-back meetings, difficulty finding focus time, not taking sufficient breaks, always feeling the need to be available, that no time for compression. I think that's a big one, because if people are having back-to-back meetings all the time, when are you actually just going, oh, I need to breathe, or I need to reflect on that meeting? And to me, that's one that staff report they're not having time to do, is that breathing time and that reflection time. Which takes me into phase 2. So this was all carried out as part of phase 1. A lot of this was our findings, and the stress risk assessment tool was done. And then we applied for further funding, which has come into phase 2. And this is where we're looking at a personal digital intervention tool, where this can empower staff, it can give them choice, it supports the wellbeing, but also supports this new way of working. But we wanted something simple as well. So as part of phase 2, the solution here for us to look at was around wellbeing. So it was a suite of digital wellbeing intervention tools to enable personal intervention and give staff the choice, alongside signposting data from the risk assessment survey. So what do we want to do from this? We wanted an evidence-based wellbeing tool that staff can choose to adopt as part of personal interventions to address the psychological stress risk that remote workers have identified from phase 1. So it's all a continuation. Some of the main outputs from this one, we are currently in this phase as well at the moment. So the current outputs from this one is a report for each of the 4 local authorities on that risk assessment tool. And like I said, we've already undertaken ours in Hull. Then produce a Microsoft suite of tools to support staff, and also a wellbeing toolkit with supportive resources, and a white paper reporting the findings of the study. So the aim of this phase then is to explore the efficacy of an intervention that aims to nudge people towards a healthy way of working. So how are we doing this then? So what we've done is we've looked at My Analytics, which you might know as Viva now. So I think they've rebranded it, but I don't know if everyone's had it rolled out yet. So that's Viva, and using that to measure any impact on feelings about work and well-being. So as part of this, each of the 4 local authorities had 40 members of staff in the intervention group who have got the My Analytics tool, and 40 members are in the control group who have not got the My Analytics tool. Each group's been doing daily diary to report on how they felt that day. So you've got one group, both groups doing the daily diary, but one's using My Analytics and Viva. If you don't know My Analytics, it shows like how many meetings you've been in, how much focus time you've had, who you've been speaking to, and it's only yourself who, it's only the members of staff can see this data, managers can't see it. It is only them who can see it. So once we've collected all that data and information, which is where we're up to now, we've just finished the trial last week. Hull University are then going to be doing workshops and focus groups with the members of staff to kind of further understand their experience. So where we're up to now is we've just finished that trial of the My Analytics, and then we're going into the focus group phase. So overall from this, we want to understand that does a digital intervention tool like My Analytics have the potential to positively impact wellbeing? So once we trained staff, did they tend to use it? Did it have an impact on the way of working? And then is there any relationship between working in healthier ways and levels of wellbeing? So it's kind of linking all together, and that's what we'll be finding out in the report as part of the findings. So that was kind of a quick run through of the work we've been doing as part of phase 1, phase 2, and I hope you found it useful. We do have a website called humanfactors.hull.act.uk/future work design, and on there is the remote working stress risk assessment tool, which is available for everyone to use. There's also contact addresses if you wanted to speak furthermore with anybody in Hull University. We also have Twitter and LinkedIn as well, which has a lot more information about the work that's been undergoing. So that was a quick whistle top store. If anybody's got any questions.